Despite one of their most popular and enduring characters being completely powerless, looking at you, pointy ears. DC has always maintained a love affair with the larger-than-life, the extreme, and the outlandish. Bigger and bolder is always better at DC, so it's unsurprising that over the years, their universe has been filled to the brim with indomitable, unbeatable, unknowably powerful beings. That's why today we're going to sift through the entirety of DC's canon to track down the 10 most powerful characters they've ever introduced. So sit back, relax, and get ready to dive into DC's most invincible icons. 10. Darkseid. Who's the nigh invulnerable tyrannical leader of an entire planet hell-bent on universal oppression and slaughter? Darkseid is. And we all know that the rest of this list must be incomprehensibly overpowered if the physical manifestation of fascistic evil is clocking in at number 10 in our rankings. These days, Darkseid might just be one of the most well-known villains in the entire DC universe, often featured as one of the Justice League's most prolific recurring headaches. But don't let this intergalactic authoritarian's 10th place finish fool you. Entire civilizations tremble at the mere mention of his name. This low-down, malevolent new god has lived for longer than some galaxies, and there are only a handful of beings in the entire universe who would dare stand up to the mighty armies of Apocalypse that bend to Darkseid's every vile whim. But even standing alone, the dastardly Darkseid is just as fierce a combatant as any hero could have the misfortune of coming across. With ferocious Omega beams crackling from his eyes, Darkseid rarely needs any other form of combat. After all, when you can one-shot nearly any living thing in existence, swords and shields start to look a lot like sticks and stones. But don't make the mistake of assuming Darkseid is a one-trick pony. This hate-fueled absolutionist rules over the most tortured pit of agony and suffering in the galaxy. And if he ever showed even a hint of weakness, his formidable forces would eat him alive in a mutiny of cosmic proportions. But this, of course, will never come to pass. In fact, though his powers are many and his weaknesses few, it's Darkseid's cold-blooded strategic brilliance that makes this interplanetary scourge feared even in the darkest depths of the cosmos. Though the awe-inspiring raw power that Darkseid wields might not match up to the other almighty entries on our list, you can be sure that Darkseid is fully capable of manipulating just about anyone and everyone to make sure Apocalypse always comes out on top. Which begs the question, what in the world could possibly frighten the dreaded Darkseid? 9. Anti-Monitor. As the individual responsible for more deaths than any other in the DC Universe's history, the Anti-Monitor has long since earned a spot in the pantheon of the greatest comic book supervillains of all time. As the primal destructive force at the center of 1985's prolific Crisis on Infinite Earths event, the Anti-Monitor possesses a near indomitable power set and was single-handedly responsible for nearly wiping out all of life as we know it. Though by modern standards, this vile villain might look a bit goofy, the terror and hopelessness the mere idea of the Anti-Monitor strikes into the hearts of heroes everywhere is boundless. This gargantuan cosmic entity of evil was created at the outset of the universe with his counterpart, the Monitor. While the Monitor came into existence within the Prime Reality, the Anti-Monitor was born to the antimatter universe and quickly brought the entire plane of existence under his heel. Once he had conquered the entire anti-universe without breaking a sweat, it was time for the Anti-Monitor to make his existence known on an even bigger stage. Barreling into the Prime material with nothing but a dream, an unstoppable army, and a machine to wipe out the entire multiverse, the Anti-Monitor's clash with the heroes and villains of all realities would be the single most astounding battle any universe had ever seen. Indeed, there has never been, nor will there ever be again, a battle on the same scale as the one that took place between the Anti-Monitor and the forces of life at large. Facing off against the combined forces of every reality, this nihilistic otherworldly entity was nearly able to single-handedly fend off the near incalculable number of heroes and villains. For a brief moment, the Anti-Monitor was truly the most powerful being the universe had ever seen. The monstrosity was able to become this powerful only due to his unique ability to absorb outlying energies into his own, becoming even more powerful the more that was thrown against him. Essentially gifted with an energy-based vampirism, this ability allowed him to draw power from individuals, planets, and even entire universes to fuel his rise to omnipotence. Though eventually, after heroic sacrifices from both Barry Allen and Supergirl, the terrible threat of the Anti-Monitor was reined in by one of the other beings on this list, but we'll get to them later. But before we see who's next on our countdown of the most powerful DC icons, be sure to subscribe to the channel with notifications on to never miss an upload, and smash that like button for some plot armor today. And get ready, dear viewers, because we ain't seen nothing yet. 8. Mr. 𝗖cie𝗺𝗿𝗃. Next on our countdown, we reach the inscrutable imp himself, that fabulous phantom fae. You know him, you love him, Mr. 𝗚𝘂𝗿𝗃𝗃. Now, admittedly, having just discussed a horrifying monstrosity hell-bent on the complete metaphysical collapse of the multiverse, this churlish cherub might seem a bit out of place. But fret not, dear viewer, for Mr. 𝗚𝘂𝗿𝗃𝗃 doesn't just deserve a place on this list, he's one of our personal favorites. You see, back in Superman's earliest years, Clark Kent's original creators were already having trouble finding threats that could truly test their burgeoning Man of Steel. Thus was born the mischievous 𝗚𝘂𝗿𝗃𝗃, whose powers over reality knew no bounds and whose physical form is entirely impervious to all threats of harm or injury. The exact limitation of 𝗚𝘂𝗿𝗃𝗃's powers are unknown, for this cantankerous sprite is bound only by his imagination. This makes him easily Superman's most powerful enemy, for time and time again, the entire world finds itself helplessly dragged along in 𝗚𝘂𝗿𝗃𝗃's next scheme. Luckily, though, this large-headed rascal isn't concerned with world domination or the end of life as we know it. If 𝗚𝘂𝗿𝗃𝗃 were interested in those goals, well, heaven help us all. For there is not a force on Earth capable of stopping this magical mischief-maker's master plan should he ever decide to put them in motion. But in the meantime, the wacky, whimsical magic that the mysterious Mr. wields has sent the last son of Krypton on many of his strangest and most absurd adventures ever. It's canonically unclear, or at least fuzzy, from where exactly the powers of 𝗚𝘂𝗿𝗃𝗃 originate. Perhaps it's his multidimensional nature that allows him such fluid and comprehensive control over reality itself. Or perhaps futuristic technology transformed a once mild-mannered being into this all-powerful puck. But wherever his magical ability hails from, one thing is for certain: Mr. 𝗚𝘂𝗿𝗃𝗃 is not to be trifled with. For once the pernicious prankster has arrived, there is only one surefire way to banish the imp from our plane of existence back to his own. He must be tricked into saying his own name backwards. While 𝗚𝘂𝗿𝗃𝗃 has rarely shown interest in any sort of treachery beyond pulling simple pranks and childish capers, his jovial and immature nature should not diminish the raw power this sprite controls. His potential, should he ever choose to reach for it, would be limitless. Some might say, endless even. 7. The Endless. For our 7th spot, we have not one single character, but an entire family. That's right, folks, the Endless have finally arrived, and not a moment too soon. The most famous of these demons by any metric is the dark and brooding Dream. But make no mistake, the titular Sandman's many brothers and sisters are all in their own way just as powerful. The Endless are embodiments of powerful invisible forces at play within the world at large, and as such, the scope of each sibling's power is defined by their domain. The 7 siblings are as follows: Dream, Desire, Delirium, Despair, Destiny, Destruction, and of course, Death. Each in this family of deific gods and goddesses reigns supreme in their respective realms, with some lording over more powerful empires than others. Death, for example, is widely considered one of, if not the most powerful sibling in the family, due to the unique nature and gravity of her dominion. But just as familial squabbles between these all-powerful brothers and sisters can give rise to physical consequences, unfortunate occurrences on the planet's surface can affect the Endless just as seriously. We saw one of the most influential examples of this during the capture and subsequent imprisonment of Dream, which served as the inciting incident of the Sandman comics. This proves that while the Endless may be omnipotent in their own realms, and while they may even bring pieces of that power with them while they travel the physical realm, no member of the Endless is without weakness. These gods and goddesses of the human experience come together to create the boundless twists and turns that make up even a single life on Earth. Without these watchful guardians, life would be meaningless and drab. For even though some may seem to be harboring nothing but evil intentions on face value, the true goal of the Endless is to create balance within the universe. If even one of these almighty pillars were to crumble and fall, life as we know it would never be the same. While most of the heroes we know and love fight their battles on the ground, battling over good and evil, right and wrong, the Endless are locked in an everlasting custodianship over something far more fundamental: existence itself. Any single hero or villain that walks the earth would shudder at the mere passing glance of one of the Endless. But even still, there are things in this existence that would make the Endless themselves shudder. 6. Superman Prime. As the flagship icon behind not only DC's entire pantheon, but superhero comics at large, it would be a shame if the Man of Steel himself didn't have an appearance to make somewhere on this list. But against the likes of literal gods, demons, and monolithic interplanar colonizers, how could a Kryptonian kid from Kansas who punches really hard hope to match up? Well, it's no secret that Superman's powers aren't stagnant. After all, countless stories feature Kal-El's powers being reduced, sapped, or outright erased either via kryptonite or from close contact with the rays of a red sun. But if Superman could be depowered, why couldn't he also be powered up? Superman Prime, also known as Superman 1,000,000, is the definitive answer to that question, my friends. This version of the Clark Kent we all know and love has lived long past the 21st century of his adulthood and well into the vast reaches of the future. While it's quite possible that Superman Prime represents the actual Prime DC Universe's Kal-El, it's equally possible that Superman Prime is the product of an alternate timeline or some similar comic booky metaphysical shenanigans. In any case, Superman Prime's unique Kryptonian physiology granted him the gift of extremely lengthened longevity. That is to say, his aging process was slowed to a crawl. After outliving his parents, his many friends and allies, and even Lois Lane, Clark finally decided to leave his adopted home and seek solace amongst the stars. His travels through the vast reaches of space would last centuries, during which time Clark set up a new fortress of solitude, right in the heart of a massive yellow sun. Living and hibernating inside the sun for tens of thousands of years allowed Soup's Kryptonian biology to bathe in the rejuvenating light from every angle. Superman's unique cells are like tiny batteries that take in and store the light from yellow suns, powering up the Man of Steel. And if his years living on Earth, 91 million light years away from the nearest power source, made him into the most powerful man on the planet, imagine what thousands of years literally living inside of a sun could do to the man. When he returned to Earth, Superman 1,000,000 literally glowed with a godlike splendor. Every power Superman had enjoyed during his time as a hero on Earth was exponentially intensified by his century-long tanning session. It's even possible that in this state, the future Superman's power level had essentially reached an infinite scale, and that the Man of Steel had once and for all become an immortal being. Of course, he wouldn't be the only one of those on our list. 5. The Spectre. The Spectre is one of those beings that defies all attempts at definition. That's because this ghostly proctor of vengeance isn't even a person at all. All of our previous entries to this list share at least one common thread. They all actually have bodies. Not even this can be said of the great and terrible Spectre, whose appearance and form shifts and varies depending on their current host. The Spectre's modus operandi is similar to that of other comic book characters, such as Ghost Rider, Moon Knight, or even Dr. Fate, in that the Spectre takes on a physical form by possessing the body of a worthy host. Unlike those other examples, the Spectre is easily the most powerful spirit ever to inhabit a human host, and the powers that their hosts were afforded while under the guise of the Spectre are near boundless. As a being of pure spectral energy, it could be said that, in essence, all the Spectre is power. The power to carry out their divine and holy judgments being first and foremost. All of the Spectre's abilities fall under the constraint of their central defining mission: to judge the guilty and bring holy retribution forth upon those that deserve it. At this point in our list, due to the era during which these characters were created, as well as the overall demographic of their creators, the hierarchical structure of power in the DC Universe begins to take on an undeniably Judeo-Christian religious flavoring. Once the Spectre has chosen an unbiased and impartial host, the spirit can begin its voyage across the Earth anew, seeking out those who require judgment and doling out otherworldly punishments and sentences in their wake. Once the Spectre is judged to being as guilty, the scope of their ability to punish that individual is almost limitless. With their judgments imbued with divine justice and all the power therein, the Spectre could take down any single being on this list without so much as breaking a sweat. The only true constraints on the Spectre's powers are internal rather than external, which means that once the Spectre has successfully judged someone unworthy, the fight has already been lost. Though it's important to note that even the Spectre's vast well of strength can temporarily run dry. It's known that sufficiently strong outbursts of magic can, for a time, make the Spectre more vulnerable as they power up once more. But the real hurdle is for the Spectre to find a worthy host, for the incorporeal ghost of vengeance cannot dole out its divine justice without first possessing a worthy conduit. And each and every one of its former hosts will tell you that they've never felt anything more powerful than the Spectre's power flowing through them in the moment of judgment. And indeed, what could be more powerful than divine judgment? Well, the divine itself, of course. 4. 𝗖ญ่𝗿𝗃. 𝗖ญ่𝗿𝗃 is hands down the hardest to place individual on this list. By the end of Elaine's story, she would undeniably be the most powerful being ever to exist. But when Elaine entered the DC Universe at large, she was a simple, mild-mannered schoolgirl with a simple yet unusual ability to see ghosts. But don't be fooled, folks. At her peak, there is literally no force in the universe powerful enough to usurp Elaine's hard-earned throne. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, aren't we? Let's start at the beginning. 𝗖ญ่𝗿𝗃 was first introduced as a side character in the Lucifer comic series. Now, the story of Elaine's ascent is long and full of twists and turns. Suffice to say, though she believed herself to be a normal human, Elaine was secretly the child of the Archangel Michael Demiurgos. As the child of Heaven's most powerful warrior, Elaine's mere existence carries with it much significance. Though initially she was only able to see and interact with the spirits of the dead, after learning of her true parentage, more of Elaine's innate holy energy began to manifest, allowing her then to grow wings on command, as well as project her spirit outwards from her physical body. But even there, Elaine's power creep did not end. Eventually, she gains full control over how she looks and is in complete control over her physical appearance. But Elaine's first step to true ascendancy came during the tragic death of her father, when he willed her to take his unknowable cosmic and holy power into herself to keep creation safe. Though this transfer almost killed the young girl, Elaine was able to use her newfound gifts to create an entire universe in which she was omnipotent, which taught her much by the way of using her limitless powers. Elaine's alternate reality could be thought of similarly to the realms of the Endless, inside of which they are all powerful, but outside of which their powers have more limitations. But even this level of power was not all that was in store for young Miss Bellick. After inheriting her dad's angelic properties and powers, Elaine soon finds herself smack dab in the middle of a war over creation itself. Eventually, at the apex of this conflict, God itself calls upon Elaine to become the new leader of the cosmos. Elaine is thrust forward onto the cosmic stage and becomes the new supreme being in the universe. Her very existence became synonymous with the universe itself. She had become, in the most literal of ways, the god of the universe. Though Elaine wasn't the first to hold such a title. 3. Michael Demiurgos. None other than Elaine's heavenly father claims the number 3 spot on our list. I mean, talk about a family business. As an archangel and the leader of the forces of heaven, Michael is undoubtedly one of the DC Universe's most powerful and feared characters. You see, in the first moments of creation, the angel Lucifer Morningstar, who would later come to be known as the Devil, rebelled against God and its heavenly forces. In that very first war between good and evil, it was none other than Michael Demiurgos who led God's forces in an attempt to quash the Devil's hellish rebellion. In this holiest of wars, Michael led the forces of good to victory against the still infantile forces of the devil. But it was Michael's own eventual capture that ended the siege of hell and allowed Lucifer's realm to continue, even flourish once humanity evolved. But even though Michael was used as a bargaining chip by his brother, make no mistake, this man's power is second to none. In fact, no matter how many universes the Anti-Monitor swallows whole, Michael would remain utterly more powerful than all below him. His power is literally insurmountable. Actually, the limits to Michael's powers are defined only in relation to 2 other beings in all of creation. Michael's angelic and divine strength is matched equally by his brother Lucifer's unholy, hellish faculties. And only one thing in all of the universe, both seen and unseen, can claim to be definitely more powerful than Michael and his brother. That would be God itself. Indeed, as the being who originally created creation itself, according to the DC Universe's inner cosmology, there is no force in the universe more powerful than Michael's creator. And God made certain, while creating Michael and Lucifer, that these 2 brothers would never be surpassed by any other in terms of raw ability. The source of Michael's power, then, is a spark of divine creation entrusted within him that allows Michael to call forth the holy fires of his master to rain down on his enemies. This spark gives Michael a power even his brother does not possess. The power to call forth something from nothing. Though Michael's only true limitation is that he cannot give that creation form without the help of Lucifer, his other half. It was with this spark that Michael was originally able to defeat and banish his brother from the heavenly gates during their first great battle. There are none that walk the earth that could possibly dream of going up against the great and terrible Michael Demiurgos while he lived. Though, once he passed his powers on to his daughter Elaine, she became every bit as powerful as her father once was. Yet not quite as powerful as Michael's malicious brother. 2. Lucifer Morningstar. He has gone by many names over the years: Hades, Satan, Beelzebub, and Pluto. But in the DC Universe, he is known best as Lucifer. For our penultimate spot, we have none other than the devil himself. For who else but Lucifer Morningstar could possibly claim to be the second most powerful being in all of existence? For while Michael was given the divine spark of spontaneity, Lucifer was given the power to sculpt God's creations to his every will and whim. This means that although Lucifer cannot create something from nothing, the limits of his powers end there. This is the all-powerful ruler of the armies of hell, after all. It's no wonder he's mind-bogglingly overpowered. So long as there is matter around him to shape, Lucifer simply cannot be matched. Though, were the devil ever to find himself somewhere without physical material to mold, he would be helpless. For the power to sculpt is mighty indeed, but the power to create is never-ending and independent. Lucifer's one and only weakness is that he's dependent on something at least existing before he can exercise his power. Of course, Lucifer is also afforded the normal powers of one of angelic heritage: super strength, super durability, winged flight, and last but not least, immortality. In addition to his impressive physical and personal powers, Lucifer is the Lord of the Hells, and as such, he has a near infinite supply of demons, devils, imps, and all manner of hellish beasts at his disposal. Entire armies, in fact, bend to Lucifer's will, which makes him not only the most powerful individual alive, but the most dominant warlord as well. Famously, even the Endless, who are as close as any come to true deity, consider Lucifer Morningstar the most dangerous and powerful man in existence. There are none who would dare try their luck against the king of the underworld. All who have tried inevitably join his vast horde of undead warriors and lost souls, destined to torment the halls of the underworld forever. Who else, I hear you ask, could possibly be more powerful than the physical manifestation of hate and fear himself? Well, my friends, that brings us to 1. The Presence. As the closest thing to an Abrahamic conception of God DC has, the Presence is the name for Lucifer and Michael's creator. Although the Presence is really the creator of all things, to be fair. Much like the Spectre, though the Presence can take physical form, this being is not embodied like the other characters on our list, but exists as the almighty, all-knowing, all-powerful deity that stands above and looks down on the universe as it progresses. This is the DC Universe's capital G God. And while the Endless, the Spectre, and many other beings across the list oversee and manage different aspects of creation, the Presence is the all-seeing eye that watches all of creation at once, knowing all, seeing all, and understanding all. As the creator of all things and the only being in all of existence that can both create spontaneously and mold all of matter to its will, there can be no question as to whether or not the Presence represents the most powerful being in all of existence. In fact, its rule is so laughably solidified and its powers so clearly insurmountable that even the overblown stories of universal destruction that DC so enjoys rarely touch on the Presence's existence. There is a real sense in which, while the Presence exists above all things, it may also exist through all things, diluted throughout the universe, across the planes of time and space, such that it exists across all things evenly, never spreading thin nor wearing out as existence grows and shrinks sporadically. This is God, creator of the angels and the hells and the cosmos itself. Until a young woman by the name of 𝗖𝗂𝗿𝗃 came around and was offered the job, the Presence sat above all things, and no single being dared go up against this omnipotent force of pure might and will. There is and never will be anything more powerful than the almighty God who birthed the universe, known simply to the beings of the DC Universe as the Presence. Did your favorite DC powerhouse make the list? Let us know in the comments. Until the next one, we hope you have a wonderful day.